Judges chapter 11, Holman Christian Standard Bible. Jephthah the Gileadite was a great warrior, but he was the son of a prostitute, and Gilead was his father. Gilead's wife bore him sons, and when they grew up, they drew Jephthah out and told him and said to him, "You have no inheritance in our father's house because you are the son of another woman." So Jephthah fled from his brothers and lived in the land of Tob. Then some lawless men joined Jephthah and traveled with him. Sometime later, the Ammonites fought against Israel. When the Ammonites made war with Israel, the elders of Gilead went out to get Jephthah from the land of Tob. They said to him, "Come, be our commander, and let's fight against the Ammonites." Jephthah replied to the elders of Gilead, "Didn't you hate me and drive me from my father's house? Why then have you come now to show me? Why have you come to me now when you're in trouble?" They answered Jephthah, "Since that's true, we now turn to you. Come with us, fight the Ammonites, and you will become leader of all the inhabitants of Gilead." So Jephthah said to them, "If you are bringing me back to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gives me to them, I will be your leader. Gives them to me, I will be your leader." The elders of Gilead said to Jephthah, "The Lord is our witness, as if we don't do this as you say." So Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead. The people put him over themselves as leader and commander, and Jephthah repeated all his terms in the presence of the Lord at Mizpah. Jephthah sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, saying, What do you have against me that you come to fight against me in my land?" The king of the Ammonites said to Jephthah's messengers, "When Israel came from Egypt, they seized my land from the Arnon to the Jabbok and Jordan. Now restore it peaceably." Jephthah again sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites to tell him, "This is what Jephthah says: Israel did not take away the land of Moab or the land of the Ammonites. When they came from Egypt, Israel traveled through the wilderness to the Red Sea and came to Kadesh. Israel sent messengers to the king of Edom, saying, "Please let us travel through your land." But the king of Edom would not listen. They also sent messengers to the king of Moab, but he refused. So Israel stayed in Kadesh. Then they traveled through the wilderness and around the lands of Edom and Moab. They came to the east side of the land of Moab and camped on the other side of the Arnon, but did not enter into the territory of Moab, for Arnon was the boundary of Moab. Then Israel sent messengers to Sihon, king of the Amorites, king of Heshbon. Israel said to them, "Please let us travel through your land to our country." But Sihon would not trust Israel to pass through the territory. Instead, Sihon gathered all his people, came to Jahaz, and fought with Israel. Then the Lord God of Israel handed over Sihon and all his people to Israel, and they defeated him. So Israel took possession of the entire land of the Amorites who lived in that country. They took possession of all the territory of the Amorites, from the Arnon to the Jabbok, and from the wilderness to the Jordan. The Lord of God of Israel has now driven out the Amorites before his people Israel, and you will now force us out? Isn't it true that you may possess whatever your god Chemosh drives out for you, and we may possess everything the Lord our God drives out before us? Now, are you any better than Balak, son of Zippor, king of Moab? Did he ever contend with Israel or fight against them? While Israel lived 300 years in Heshbon and its village, and in Aurora and its villages, and in all the cities that are on the banks of the Arnon, why didn't you take them back at that time? I have not sinned against you, but you have wronged me by fighting against me. Let the Lord, who is the judge, decide today between the Israelites and the Ammonites. The king of the Ammonites would not listen to Jephthah's message that he sent him. The Spirit of the Lord came on Jephthah, and who traveled through Gilead and Manasseh, then through Mizpah of Gilead. He crossed over to the Ammonites from Mizpah to Gilead. Jephthah made his vow to the Lord: "If you will hand over the Ammonites to me, whatever comes out of my doors of my house to greet me when I return in peace from the Ammonites will belong to the Lord, and I will offer it as a burnt offering." Jephthah crossed over to the Ammonites to fight against them, and the Lord handed them over to him. He defeated 20 of their cities with a great slaughter, from Aurora all the way to the entrance of Minnith and to Abel Kerim. So the Ammonites were subdued before the Israelites. When Jephthah went to his home in Mizpah, there was his daughter coming out to meet him with tambourines and dancing. She was his only child. He had no other son or daughter besides her. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and said, "No, not my daughter. You have devastated me. You have brought great misery on me. I've given my word to the Lord, and I cannot take it back." And she said, "My father, you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me as you have said, but for the Lord brought vengeance on your enemies, the Ammonites." She also said to her father, "Let me do this one thing. Let me wander for 2 months through the mountains with my friends and mourn my virginity." "Go," he said to her, and he sent her away for 2 months. So she went with her friends and mourned her virginity as she wandered through the mountains. At the end of 2 months, she returned to her father, and he kept the vow he had made about her, and she had never been intimate with a man. Now it became a custom in Israel that 4 days each year the young women of Israel would commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite.